So this is the Mission 3 commentary for T2X. And right at the start here, this is after Zaya has completed the museum mission, and this is 1 year, approximately, after Zaya has first arrived at the city and has witnessed what she believes is the death of her cousin. And so we got a lot of questions, actually, after we released about the consistency of the timeline and what was going on immediately outside of Zaya's immediate perception. And so pretty much what we wanted to communicate with Mission 2 and this mission here was that the smugglers were active during this whole time. They took Zaya's ship and Zaya's cargo after Mission 1 and had subsequently either held on to it for a while, as we might learn later in the redistribution game, or had sold it to Limes, the museum curator in Mission 2, and then he eventually put it out on display. And even though it's a year later, and a lot has transpired in that time, it all internally makes sense, because there's a lot of things that have to happen before that dragon statue is put on display. Neeson, the leader of the smugglers, may have held on to it for a while, and Limes, the curator, may have held on to it for a while before he had it repaired and put it out there. So that was just to address some of the plot issues that came up. We were thinking about all this, and we wanted to make sure that the universe was fictionally consistent as we were going into this open-ended city map here.
I got to say something about the smuggler in that last picture that it showed. One of the guys that did a lot of the artwork for this particular briefing, and then some later on, was a friend of mine named Randall, who, again, another guy who really has never played Thief, doesn't know anything about the Thief universe. But that smuggler in that picture, I swear it is a self-portrait. It looks just like the guy. And, it's just funny to me when I'd forgotten that he had done that, but he's got kind of a cameo there in the briefing. But that guy did a lot of the artwork for the briefing, or quite a bit of the artwork for some of the briefings.
Yeah, he did quite a few. The rest of the drawings in here, I think, were actually done by Broken Arts, who also did a bunch of briefing artwork for us. And this ended up being one of our more ambitious briefings. So we have like 6 or 7 drawings here, and we had to pare back at the end and reduce some of the scope of some of our briefings. But this one remained intact, which is fortunate.
Right. Yeah, we did have to cut a lot of artwork just for time purposes. We were running out of time to release, and there's so much artwork. I mean, it was amazing how much material was done just in the amount of time that we had. But I was happy with them. I mean, they're not obviously Rust Monkey is kind of known for the Thief. Is that the name? If I got the name right, Rust Monkey that did the. You're looking at me like you have no idea. For the original games.
For the original games, no. Rust Monkey was the company formed by Dan Thron and the original cutscene guys who did the cutscenes for the Thief games. Yeah. And by the time Thief 3 came around, they had their own company.
Yeah, and we definitely tried to emulate that, though. So here we have... you were looking back over her shoulder there at a place you walked through in Mission 1, so there's a little connectivity there.
Yeah, it was important for us to maintain kind of a real internal consistency between the missions, so wherever possible we exported and imported different pieces of maps as overlook sites into other places, and that way the world would feel connected and consistent. So in this case, there's a part of Mad God's Mission 1 that you start out overlooking at the start here. Some maps that didn't work as well, like for Mission 2, the museum mission that took place in Aldale, like a wealthy section of the city, didn't really fit anywhere else. But most of the maps, I think, appear in more than one spot in some form or another.
Ice arrows. The elemental catalyst.
Yeah, so we had a really difficult problem determining what kind of inventory items we wanted the player to have, because there's a really hardcore contingent in the community that doesn't want Thief gameplay changed or broken in any way, but at the same time, we didn't want to present the same old tired thing. We wanted to present new inventory items and weapons and give the player new opportunities for emergent gameplay. So we had a lot of discussions at the start, and I think somebody, it might have been Doom, came up with the idea for ice arrows, which is the very first weapon that we designed, and we basically just wanted a weapon that would freeze AI and allow for a lot of different possibilities there, because that gives you the opportunity to run away or to use another weapon to shatter them, or just to create a good escape for yourself. But then the question was, how do we integrate, like, even that one single arrow, that one single weapon? Do we put it in addition to all of our other arrows? Do we replace one? Do we change the functionality of some of our existing arrows, like the water arrow, to an inventory item? How do we swap that around? And eventually what we settled on was the idea of this power-up, this elemental catalyst that would change your arrows, basically give them like new and enhanced properties. And so water arrows became ice arrows, and then later we had fire arrows becoming flare arrows, and so on. And that's not necessarily the kind of idea that would work in an original game if we'd been building a game from scratch, because it adds an additional layer of complexity on top of an already big inventory system. But in our specific case, we were developing an expansion pack, and one where we could pretty much assume that people had at least some degree of familiarity with Thief weapons and Thief gameplay. And so what it allowed us to do was basically retain all of the original Thief gameplay without changing it, but at the same time add this new layer on top of it, and add all these other emergent possibilities on top of it. So we had 4 new arrows that we could integrate seamlessly with this one simple press of a button through this inventory object, and it seemed to work pretty well.
I'm seeing this is Dave's playthrough that we're watching here, and I'm just learning. Oh, I had no idea that water arrow was in that corner. And I beta tested this thing a million times, but it's just and just the different way that you're taking a different route and doing a little different than.
Yeah, this is pretty open ended.
I do like this way into the city. I thought this was a great idea.
Yeah, for ice arrows here. Originally, this was the first place where you got an opportunity to use ice arrows, but that was no good at all, because people didn't figure it out. They didn't realize that they had it on their inventory. We needed to put a spot at the beginning of the map, right there immediately, to allow the player to use this new tool and figure out how it worked. And so we built, or I built like a little section where there was an obvious power-up that you wanted, a gas arrow, which is pretty much the most powerful arrow in the game.
You can always lure somebody with a gas arrow,
And so the player's definitely going to want that, and they're going to have to figure out a way to get it, and the only way to get it is to use an ice arrow. Now, a lot of times in games, when you want a player to learn to use a new tool, obviously you're going to have a very heavy-handed tutorial where you're going to force the player to use it. We really considered doing that, but in the end we chose not to. Thief is really... doesn't do that very often. It doesn't actually force you to use any tools, and there's really no precedent for it anywhere in the Thief games. We don't have any systems for infinite responding arrows if players waste all their arrows. And we just felt, in the spirit of Thief, we didn't want to be really too heavy-handed. We just wanted to present players with an obvious opportunity to use a tool that we had just given them. And I think most players will definitely feel inclined to do that because it's right there in front of them.
Something else I noticed the other day when I was looking back through some of this is I don't know if you didn't go up there, but the quote scroll, the elusive quote scroll, or one of them is up there on the rooftop, and all the quotes are about porn for some reason. I was looking back through that, going, I don't know what was going on with us at the time, but it's like that was like the going joke, it was overriding the Thief files with porn and stuff, and which never happened.
We can blame Avalon for that.
I think mostly that was Avalon. Yeah.
Well, I think it was because we worked like so many late nights, and it was just like late at night and in an IRC room like full of a bunch of dudes.
Well, and
what else are you going to talk about?
Right, your level of humor kind of goes from
it goes right straight to the toilet.
Right, it's just
So anyway, I didn't want to reveal too many of the secrets on my playthrough here, but the quote scroll was right up there in the area of the water.
I gave it away.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We can tell them where it is. Yeah. I should mention actually about my playthroughs here that I intentionally played them a little imperfectly, and the reason for that is just so that we can see the different AI behaviors and the different player tools, and ultimately I think that leads to a more entertaining video to watch than something that's completely perfect and ghosted.
A video walkthrough.
Yeah, video walkthrough, basically. So, but this is an interesting scenario here. We talked about different ways to get into the market district. We really wanted a section that was kind of open for exploration at the start, like a residential area, and then the market district, which was the player's ultimate goal. And we wanted a really big, obvious way here, which was like a gate into the city section with a puzzle to get through it, and then some less obvious ways. There's the way that I went originally, where you use an ice arrow to get up on a ledge and then go via rooftop. And then if you're willing to backtrack a little bit, you can get a sewer key and then go back near the beginning of the mission or to one of these places here and go through the sewers, and all those are equally valid.
Yeah.
So this right here basically is a long conversation written by me, and you can tell because it's too long, that's why. And it plays out right here where you witness these guards put in a gate code and then open the gate, and it's kind of a two-part puzzle. You have to shoot an arrow at a lever and then enter the code. And if you're paying attention and you watch, then you can actually see the code and then enter it in when these guards go on their break right here. And then
you can actually see the code by using your mechanical eye to zoom in
on
the thing. That was something that was an issue a little bit. But
Yeah, we thought, the mechanical eye thing, we kept the player zoom in the game. We basically felt that, any first-person game pretty much that came out at the time had a zoom feature. We didn't think there was anything supernatural about it. We just left it in.
It's her spyglass. It's a spyglass that she pulls out and uses when she...
Yeah. So, and it's a little bit of trivia. The gate code here is my birthday.
Oh, hey.
So
I didn't know that.
If you happen to forget, there you go.
All right. But again, with this, and Rain designed this level pretty much by himself, and we were really wanting to emphasize the openness and the just have it be as non-linear as possible. Because again, we're getting ready to go into mission 4, which is the train mission, and even though there's some options there, again, you kind of feel like you're being herded in a way through parts of that. Yeah. So we wanted the mission 2 and 3 to again just give as many options as possible for accomplishing goals, and a lot of the vertical. I was a big fan of this mission because my favorite thief mission is Life of the Party. I know a lot of people really enjoy that one just because of the Thieves Highway, and so I was real happy when we started play testing this to see echoes of that in the mission here, where you could get up on the roofs and really travel above the heads of the guard and look down on some of the conflicts and conversations and things. It really to me started feeling like Thief in this mission when I was able to do that, and I think the same is true for a lot of people.
Yeah, I kind of wanted the city to exist on 3 vertical levels. There's the street level, there's the sewer level, and then there's the rooftops. And I wanted it to be very interconnected, but not really too interconnected. I wanted to force the player down to street level at different times. And the reason being is because if you stick too much to the underground or the Thieves Highway, you end up skipping a lot of gameplay, and you end up bypassing a lot of things that I didn't want you to bypass. So there's a lot of vertical movement, but you're going back and forth a lot, and I hope people were okay with that. And the same thing is kind of true of the way that I used water in this map, because it was possible for me to create like a canal system where there was like a big canal going through the whole map, but that's kind of what happened in Thief 2 and the ambush and courier missions, and I just kind of felt like that would lead to some boring scenarios, because if you fall down in the canal, it's like the AI has a hard time following you. You can kind of hang out down there and there's nothing going on. It's just kind of plain. But by keeping the water kind of segregated to these pools, I could kind of encourage you to use ice arrows, but not really allow you to escape any of the gameplay. They're just kind of these isolated little sections here. Mm-hmm. And here you see like an example of another open exploration area where you can use an ice arrow to bypass the water here to get some treasure.
Right. Or not, if you don't want to.
Or not, yeah, or not.
And then the hardest piece of loot, I won't give away where it is, but it's in this area. And
I might get it here. Yeah.
Are you going to go get it? It took me forever to find this, and but of course, again, to me, in Thief 2, the exception was masks and casing the joint, but I just felt like in the Dark Project, it was really a challenge to get 100% of the loot, and some of the, not all the missions, but there's some of these where you really have to look pretty hard, and that was one of those spots right there where I just, and never in a million years would have thought to find it there. But then again, I'm not a very skilled Thief player, so.
We got plenty of practice, so no excuses.
Yeah. The other thing with this mission too is that that I remember it was actually an easier one for the plot team, because it was pretty straightforward. There's no mandatory conversations. There's nothing that that Zaya has to read. In other words, we don't have to lead her into a particular room to read a particular book. She's just got to get to Kadar's shop.
Yeah, and don't need many choke points.
Yeah, it was real, and I remember there wasn't a lot of documentation for it either. There wasn't a lot of there were some readables in here, but not nearly what we had in Mission 2, which I think was a good balance, again, because you did feel, again, the way I play Thief, I feel compelled to stop and read every little thing along the way, and there was so much to read in the museum that it was kind of nice in this mission to not, that wasn't required, and we didn't leave a lot of books laying around. We just pretty much stuck to the sneaking and the rooftops and all that. So
fictionally, one of the most important things to communicate was really the lockdown in the Market District, because I mentioned in the Mission 2 commentary that where applicable we wanted guards to be non-hostile, but here we didn't want to have a mission that was bereft of gameplay, so we needed hostile guards. So we came up with this fictional justification where the Market District was on lockdown due to this string of burglaries that are taking place inside. And actually in this map, one of the subplots that we have, one of the few subplots that we have, is the idea that these thieves are in these shops breaking in, so you're not the only thief that's on the prowl.
Right.
And very close to this location, actually, you actually witnessed two of the thieves steal some goods and then get jumped by the City Watch.
Or, for all we know, it could be Garrett that's been doing some of that, too. So.
Yeah, certainly. So also, speaking of non-hostile guards, we started out in the residential area, and we did want to communicate there that the player had kind of free reign to explore. So before the player breaks into the Market District, they can kind of look around and take in the sights and explore and not really have to worry about a level of tension until they get to where the hostile guards are. And we communicated that in a variety of different ways as usual. We mentioned it in the briefing. It's mentioned in your objectives. And then when Zaya actually breaks into the Market District for the first time, there's a voiceover again that clues you into the fact that the guards are going to be attacking you now.
Right. Now, some of these signs, I don't know about in this. I think in this mission too. I know in some of the missions, particularly Mission 1, some of the signs for the shops. There's very few of them that aren't a reference to some people hate that, but most of them are a reference to something. I know for me, I did a lot of references to Discworld and some Terry Goodkind. I think even like Lord of the Rings, we were all pretty enamored with Fellowship of the Ring at the time.
Conan the Barbarian, yeah,
Conan the Barbarian. And but I think one of the shops was called like Weta-Bergen, because we were all watching the documentaries for Lord of the Rings and obsessed with Weta and just how great all that was. So and I don't know if you did that in this mission or not. I just
a little bit here and there. Some of the store names I think you guys came up with, and then some of them I think were done by me. So it was a split.
Yeah, and there's some of them that are obviously pretty obscure, but I know I can speak for Valletta and myself. We all pretty much always there was a reference to some fantasy literature or television show or a person or something like that. So again, it pays to kind of check out all those things just to see if you recognize any of them. Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I was going for here with the aesthetic, this is a pretty good example of the general aesthetic I was going for on the map was kind of a more upscale Victorian Market District, and you can see kind of the Gothic architectural influences and the Victorian influences here, and I really wanted that to come through a little more strongly than it had in the original Thief missions and also in the earlier T2X mission 1, where it's more of a poor section. When we originally wrote the plot document, the mission document for this map, the idea was to do partially like a market district and then partially like some warehouses. And the more I thought about it, the more I started designing it, I kind of felt like the idea of warehouses was really played out in shipping and receiving, and it would be a lot more interesting if we could go somewhere a little more upscale. Because Mission 1, when you first start an unexpected shelter, you're right in kind of a poor, destitute area of the city. So it'd be nice, it's kind of a contrast to go somewhere that's upscale. And when you steal from the merchants, you don't feel as bad because they're the corrupt, greedy merchants, and obviously there's more loot for the taking here.
Well, and it also, again, kind of helped to establish, where we were in the Thief timeline, because we didn't really see a lot of Victorian architecture in the Dark Project. It was a lot of, I don't want to say ghetto, but it was just not. Most of the sections of town you were in were not very nice, as opposed to, even the beginning of Thief 2. You start out with Running Interference. You've got this nice,
posh Victorian,
right, with all the white and blue textures, and everything looks like ivory and then the same thing with the bank mission, and you've got several of those casing the joint in Thief 2, and it kind of helps to translate. We're not quite into that full blown into the Thief 2 era yet, into the Metal Age yet, but we're getting there, and you're seeing some of that again reflected in the textures that are being used and some of the architecture and so on.
Yeah, and we could pick which elements we wanted to emphasize and which ones we didn't. We always really like the Gothic and Victorian stuff, so those are the kind of influences that we wanted to bring to the project.
And a technical aspect here, since you're in this spot, with all these lovely rounded arches that I don't think had been seen before really in fan missions, or that was something that was developed I think Avalon came up with that? Or
Yeah, it was actually
you?
Avalon.
Okay.
Avalon actually came up with a way using DrawNet's clunky BSP-based editor to make some really smooth arches.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure that we showed those off in the museum map in here, especially.
Right.
So there's a lot of really super rounded arches. We're not limited to 8 and 10-sided cylinders anymore. We have 16 or 20-sided curves, and that lends like a really unique aesthetic to the project. I think it makes a big difference in some areas.
And I don't know if I haven't played a lot of fan missions since then, so I don't know if that's something that's been adopted very much at all.
Not that I've seen, but maybe.
But hopefully it will be. But it's. I remember everybody was real excited about that, and I'm not. I was not the greatest at DrawMed. I was one of the writers and kind of coordinating things, but they were all so excited about this, and for me, I thought, okay, well, let's see what it does.
The competition.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember you guys were trying to like explain it to me, and that this will kind of give us an edge over some other things that are coming out visually, graphically. It really it gives an updated look to the architecture, and I didn't understand it when you were explaining, but of course, when you see it, if you're real familiar with the architecture in Thief, when the first time you see one of those, you kind of think, wow, that looks really nice. And
looks a lot better than most of the stuff you see in the Dark Engine. And it's kind of funny we're talking about this because obviously by the time T2X was released, I mean, we're even well beyond the smooth curves of Quake 3 era. I mean, we were into stencil shadows by that point,
Right.
But you still, for Thief players that are used to seeing like an aging Dark Engine, I think it was a nice little touch that we were able to add.
Right. Yeah, so anybody that makes fan missions, if you're watching this, open up the editor and look at these, and you can see how.
Actually, they won't be able to.
Can they not?
We shipped stripped missions, so they can't see the brochure.
That's evil, man.
we may release them at some point, though, 'cause if there's still interest. Yeah, surprisingly, people still are making Thief 2 fan missions. So maybe we should.
New ones every day, and they seem to be getting. There's a lot of good quality stuff coming out too.
Yeah,
and that's encouraging. I mean, it's definitely encouraging for me. One of the reasons that I was personally so desperate to get this project done and to see it through was because I didn't want the Thief universe to die, and I enjoy playing the fan missions, and we really felt like this whole project would just be a shot in the arm for the community that had just lost, we just lost our foundation, kind of, which was Looking Glass, and to really kind of send that message that, look, we're capable of doing this as a community, and putting out some quality stuff here to play, and we can still enjoy this game.
It's interesting though. For a couple of years, the community was kind of dead because I think all the real experienced guys were sucked up by the different projects, by us and by Circle of Stone and Shadow. And
right. No fan missions.
Yeah, no fan missions for a while. Yeah.
Right. But man, this is the little rooftop cafe here that we're looking at. That was one of my favorite spots in this. It just again reminded me of Life of the Party so much.
Yeah, it's hard to get this vertical space in here and still allow the player to mantle up easily or use rope arrows to get up here. But there's a few spots where it seems to work pretty well.
But there was a sense. I think one of the things that so many people enjoyed about Life of the Party was, there's something about being on a rooftop in the dead of night in the city that makes you feel like you own the place, and you really feel like a thief. I mean, it really does lend credibility to this illusion, this fantasy that you are a thief prowling the city. And I'm glad that we got this in toward the beginning of the game because it kind of lends that same credibility to Zaya, that she is capable of going out and kind of mastering the night and mastering the rooftops, and that she's up to the task that's before her. And this was good. There was just a lot of variety of gameplay in here that is very reminiscent of that one of the that favorite mission from Thief 2 for so many people.
Yeah, that was a great map. Yeah, it's interesting talking about that because there were a lot of different versions of this map. It was actually one of the first things I worked on in T2X. I was mission design lead, and I wanted to delegate as much as possible, but I wanted to do at least one map. So I built an early draft of this, and the original draft was actually bigger in terms of its street layout, but didn't have nearly as many places to explore and not nearly as many nooks and crannies. And as I developed different versions of this and different drafts, the street layout kept getting simpler and simpler, but the connectivity of the rooftops and the intricacy of spaces kept increasing until finally this is the version that I think has the most little nooks and crannies to explore. So if you don't want to tally, I mean, you can go pretty much straight forward on the street. The layout of the city is basically like a big circle, so you're eventually bound to wind up at Kadar Shop. But if you want to explore and go to all these different places, then you can spend a really long time everywhere.
Well, I'm in the process of kind of editing some walkthroughs that have already been done by Nightwalker, and adding to those loot maps, and man, this map is a bitch to try to place all the loot in on that map that we've got. Trying to figure out which direction you're facing, what corner was that goblet in, and you're trying to make these maps, and it's like, oh gosh, it's just, you can really get turned around in it. But again, that's the personality of the city, that it folds back on itself, and the streets wind and twist and all of this. It just
and that's something
that's what we love about it.
Yeah, you see in traditional medieval cities and Victorian era cities is all these little alleyways and nooks and crannies and places to go. It's not something that a lot of particularly Americans are familiar with, having these really tight, narrow streets and different places to explore.
Well, it's the difference between a city that just happens and a city that grows.
Right,
it's
exactly.
planned.
It grows onto itself over time.
Right.
Yeah.
Most medieval cities are not planned, and obviously the city follows that blueprint.
Yeah.
You're going to talk about the audio in this too, because this was I felt like also the mission where we were really trying to really communicated to the player that we're trying to step up to the plate here with the soundtrack and really.
Yes, it was a very big plate with Eric Birch just doing the
Right,
sound for the
right.
Thief games, but
Right.
we definitely had a lot of sound ambitions in the very beginning. We wanted a separate sound team to do voices and ambience and music and everything else that's associated with the Thief game, and we had. Originally, we had an audio lead who didn't have really like the amount of time that was necessary to really dedicate to the project. He only really wanted to spend a couple hours on weekends, and it was just too ambitious for that. So after the first year, I think we really pretty much parted ways and assembled a whole new team of audio guys, a smaller team actually, a more dedicated team. At the end of the first year, we had, I think, 40 ambient tracks, about 5 of which were useful because
Yeah, we had a lot of stuff
people were making audio tracks, and they were like all different compressions, like a stereo instead of mono. They were
Radio
saved
Shack
wrong.
microphones,
Yeah, Radio Shack microphones. It was just horrible. It was just audio was like completely in crisis, and we had 2 voices, both of which were done by Lone Star, kind of on his own. And Lone Star wasn't there to help us because he actually sold his audio equipment and left the community. So we were in a bad way for audio after the first year. Mm-hmm. So we started over, and we got Paul Fox, who'd helped me out on the Inverted Mans. He's an incredibly busy guy, but always does great work. Really phenomenal sound guy who was able to help us out part of the time when he had time. And then a few other people like Keeper Crimson did a whole lot of audio, and a bunch of other guys did a number of tracks for us to really help us out.
Well, and in a game like this, I mean, Thief, kind of lives and dies by the sound. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
By the audio track, because it is, it's just so much of the immersiveness, if that's a word.
Yeah.
And for everything from the footsteps to the barks and just the different things, but also just even the wind whistling through the streets, and then of course in some of the pagan areas you've got kind of the low hum of the. I don't know, whatever it is they use. You hear oboes and all kinds of stuff in Eric's soundtrack that he used string sections and all that. And you really, when you're trying to, again, we're trying to make something that was on par or at least did honor to Looking Glass. And man, you've got to have crack audio. You've really got to have a good audio track. And I remember that being a really scary point, kind of when we realized, man, our audio is like 2 years behind the rest of the project, and we've got to make some changes here. And fortunately, these guys came on board and really came through for us. Yeah,
fortunately, we got some really dedicated guys. Crimson was really just a trooper. We had a lot of redos with him. He did he kind of liked to work. Give us some stuff and then get feedback and then go back and make changes, which was great. Paul is just a consummate professional, and then we had some other guys like Muzzman and Manticore did some tracks for us, which were great. And eventually we brought everything together. But it's kind of funny though, the most tracks that people did were actually for undead maps. We had like 4 times the amount of undead ambience than like for anything else. We were always lacking for like wind and like basic like museum or mansion backgrounds and stuff like that. We had to repeatedly go back and ask for them, but eventually we got it all.
Everybody
done.
likes to make zombie noises.
Yeah, yeah, like the creepy undead stuff.
Now, did you want to talk about the schemas here?
I guess we could talk just technically for a minute, like about what the audio entailed for Thief, because Unlike some other more modern games, all the properties for the sounds in Thief are actually controlled through text files called schemas, and in order to define the properties of any given sound, you have to edit the schema, so you have to learn kind of a new tool set and how to edit these specialized text files. And when I did the inverted mans, like at the very beginning of T2X, kind of independently, I kind of experimented with that to kind of figure out what to do, and eventually ended up writing a tutorial on schemas and trying to figure them all out, specifically so that they could be used in T2X and we could make good use of them. And the nice thing about having separate text files like that is that you can edit them independently at any given time, and you can control different aspects of the sound that you can't control with an individual WAV file. For example, you can control whether or not a sound cue in the game can randomly choose between different WAV files, or if you want to play a WAV file consistently and repeatedly, or you want it to play and then pause and then play something else, or you can adjust the volume or anything like that. Like anything that you would typically associate with sounds is all done through editing those text files. So that was kind of a technical hurdle that we had to overcome. One that was time consuming, not real challenging, but definitely time consuming.
That was a lot. I mean, to me, there's just a lot of tedious things that when you first embark on this mission to create a campaign, you think about writing the story and creating these cool levels, and you forget about having to have 7 different versions of of an audio clip of somebody dying, and then trying to make all those sound like they were recorded in the same place, and all these little tedious things that grammar and spell checking all the documents. I mean, there's just a lot. And like you saw with the schemas, stuff that's not difficult necessarily, but just takes a lot of time.
Yeah, and a lot of trial and error.
Consuming. And,
the voice acting in particular was just a nightmare because, like I mentioned, we only really had 2 of those voice tracks done. And we can't just take the voice files and put them in game. We needed to write a schema for them, and we needed to go through a post process so those sound files would ultimately sound consistent with all the other voices in the game and sound like we wanted them to sound. So that is a really big, huge, tedious process. It's a thankless process. Unfortunately, we had at the very beginning a guy called Muzzman from the community who was really an experienced audio guy and had the most concise ideas about how to best go about that, how to best achieve like a sound for our voice files and get them sounding high quality and comparable to the original Thief and Thief 2 voices. Yeah.
And we had a couple of odd ones here and there that when you hear them, you kind of go, "Oh wow, that could have been better."
Well, there's an explanation for that, and that is that Muzzman. I basically appointed Muzzman to be the guy who took care of that process because he was by far the most qualified and most knowledgeable, and I helped him out where I could. But the problem was it was so boring and tedious, and he didn't have the time that he eventually left. He eventually disappeared, which really frustrated the hell out of me at the time because he was like the one guy who could control these voices. And so at the end, I ended up having to take over the slack. I basically took all the things that he taught me and did the best job I could post processing the last of the files. But ultimately, they're not going to be as good. And some you don't really notice, like if somebody records at the start and is really clear and doesn't have a lot of noise, then the post-processing job that I was able to do, I think, is comparable to the others. But when you have like the problem voices that sound like they're recorded in a bucket, like this, those I can't do much with. So,
yeah. Well, and it got to a point. We were, like you say, we were so far behind. There's the Thief thing you're talking about where they.
Oh yeah, the Thief guys breaking in.
Again, a nice little echo of Life of the Party where Garrett comes upon the housebreakers. That one part, but. Yeah, we were so far behind on the audio at one point, in particular, like the voice acting. It was an interesting thing trying to cast people because you would get these, you would get kind of a demo from someone that their voice acting was great, but it sounded like they were standing in front of an airplane, propeller or something while they were talking. I mean, it was just the quality of the recording was bad. The voice acting was great, and vice versa. You get some really horrible voice actors maybe that had really good, crisp, clean audio files. So trying to sift through all that, but we ended up actually. For variety's sake, but also for time, a lot of the guys that built missions. I mean, I know I did 3 or 4 voices. I know you did 1 or 2. Guys that didn't sign up to do audio and didn't want to do audio, had no talent for voice acting whatsoever, kind of had to step up and do some guards voices and do some hammers and things like that. And I think, we got a lot of really good stuff. I still hear every time I go through and play this, like I said, I've been playing through, doing some walkthroughs, and there was a comment that one of the hammers made that I had never heard before.
Yeah, there's tons.
Which to me speaks of the volume of stuff that we were able actually to, in the end, to come up with, to create. That you can still hear new things every once in a while.
Yeah, the problem really was not so much that we were behind, it's just that we were just like so ambitious, and we were so damn stubborn, like we didn't want to scale back.
Right.
So in any given voice, like the average servant or noble probably has like 80 to 100 voice files, and the average guard has like 150 to 170. So that's a lot of not only recording work, but a lot of schema work and a hell of a lot of post-processing work.
Right.
So it was very much a pain to get all those in the game, but we did. We ended up with over 3,000 voice files. I think probably closer to 3,500 when all was said and done, which is just insane. I don't think anybody else would do that for free, if no matter what the reward was.
I don't think I would do it again for free. I don't think so either. But there were some times too when you'd get an audio file that man, this guy's really good. I wonder if he can, he does a great guard voice. I wonder if he could also do a hammer, and maybe he only signed up to do one or two things, and in the end he ended up doing 8 or 9 different, maybe not that many, but doing a wider variety than he expected at the beginning, and being able to change his voice enough to make him sound different, and that was a real blessing too. To have some guys that were able to do that, and girls that were able to do that.
Yeah, I think that was when we found somebody that we liked who was both a good voice actor and who was able to record without too much noise. We tended to reuse them because it was such a hassle to find new people and communicate exactly what they needed to do.
Yeah, we had a special team that for guilt trips that we would we would assign. You need to get on this guy and really lay it on thick and see if you can get him to do some more stuff for us.
It was interesting to hear all their personalities come through, because in the beginning, when I took over audio and was giving direction to people, I actually did a pretty bad job, because I assumed that people were kind of familiar with the Thief voices and would know the kind of lines, and people weren't. They would come back to me and say, like, well, what do you mean by grunt of pain? And it's like, well, how do I type that out, like in an email and describe what I need? But eventually, just through very specific direction, I think, and a lot of back and forth, we ended up getting what we wanted for the voices, and so hopefully you don't hear too many errors, if any at all.
Yeah. And, even within all those, I hear things from time to time that, are kind of spoofs or takeoffs on lines from the original thing where, there's one, and I didn't even write it. It was a servant voice that I did, and I think Valletta or Toolhead actually wrote the lines for him, but where he's walking around talking about, he says, I don't know what everybody's complaining about. I like rat, because there had been some line in another one where a guy was saying something about eating rats. He wasn't eating rats. They were complaining about rat meat. Yeah. And so there's a lot of little things like that, but you just have to be in the right place at the right time, and that's nice for replayability, that you kind of get some. It's not like a lot of fan missions where you just had 2 people doing the voices and it's kind of the same thing over and over. We really wanted to have that variety again, because that's one of the things that distinguishes the original games, is the great voice acting, the wide variety of
characters. Yeah. Some funny, some serious. It's really kind of an eclectic mix of characters.
Yeah. We didn't really have a standout like Benny in the originals, but you can't really copy Benny.
Yeah. I think we had a few people that were pretty funny. I think, I don't know, one of my favorite voices, I think, is actually the one that Lazarus did for us, which was one of the smuggler voices. Just, he said he went for, what did he say, like Clint Eastwood with lung cancer or something like that, like in order to get it right.
Well, I can't remember. There's one of the hammers that always cracks me up because, when he'll give you that warning, like, where he thinks maybe he saw you, but he says, oh, 'twas nothing. This speaks ill of my drink at the builder's table, And I thought that's just, that's something you would have heard in the original Thief games. And, whoever, I don't know if the voice actor came up with that or one of our writers did, but I thought, man, we're, when I start hearing things like that, when I was hearing things like that, I thought, we're getting close here, we're really hitting close to something I think Looking Glass would have been proud of.
Yeah, and and actually, like most of those lines, I think were actually come up with by the actors themselves, because a lot of times the writers weren't involved, like hardly at all, because you guys were overworked, I think, doing other stuff in mission design documents, and I would write like a few example lines and sometimes specifics, and the conversation lines were specifics, but a lot of the idle barks and so forth, I would kind of give them an idea and then just let them riff on that.
We didn't write those,
and some people did a really great job with it, I think.
Yeah. Some pretty funny stuff. I was happy, for it to have gotten to the point where it was. I mean, it was just neglected for a while, and then for it to come out the way it did, I was real pleased.
Yeah, and eventually we got some custom stuff at the end where I think Paul Fox came in and did some creature voices for us and some other stuff that really helped.
Yeah.
But here we're approaching the end of the mission here.
Right.
And this building, we wanted Kadar's shop to be in a building with other shops, so it wasn't too prominent, so that it was kind of secluded, kind of sequestered away, so it wouldn't be too obvious that it was abandoned. He just had kind of a room in this building. Right. And we wanted basically only two entrances in. There's two ways you can get in. You can find the locksmith on one side of the city and steal a key to the front door, or if you go through the city in the other direction, you can go to the Hammerite building and make a lever that'll open the portcullis on one side.
Right. Well, and there were also some questions, because obviously a year has passed. How is Kadar's stuff even still in this building? I mean, wouldn't he have been evicted and his stuff thrown out in the street at this point? But I think we do make a mention earlier on of him, prepaying rent, paying rent forward or whatever to
yeah, we had to kind of gloss over that. It was a necessary kind of evil for plot, but
tough thing. But we wanted to, but I think in the end too, it was trying to paint Kadar, that plus the text that we actually find in his shop here, kind of gives a little bit of character to him, in that he was somebody that would have paid ahead, 8-10 months or whatever. He didn't want to have business with the smugglers. He was a fairly honest guy. Had the curator pegged from the beginning that he was a little bit of a weirdo, and so I didn't mind too much that the idea of him prepaying that far in advance. But
yeah,
and so here's his shop, and just trying to reveal a little bit at a time along the way of what happened and how we came to the point that we were in the first mission where he was ambushed by these guys.
Mm-hmm. And this is a pretty small shop. We just wanted to give the player the opportunity to steal a couple pieces of loot and not have to look too hard to really find the one critical piece of information, which was the papyrus that you find in the hidden compartment underneath the counter.
Mm-hmm. Right there. Mm-hmm. You said Avalon actually paid you a rare compliment on this one. The man who
he actually did. There was several drafts of this, and one of the biggest things I changed from draft to draft was cutting back the residential district in the very beginning, because I thought that was kind of a pointless space. I mean, it's good to have it there for exploration purposes and kind of set the mood, but really we wanted to get into the market district as soon as possible, and I wanted to expand the rooftop gameplay and whatnot. And there were a couple versions. There were two versions that were just radically different from each other, and when I uploaded the new one, Avalon seemed to like it, and I knew that I had kind of a winner at that point, because he never paid anything. Yeah, never liked anything. So out of all the missions I built, I think professionally and on a fan mission level, I think this is one of my favorites, if not my most favorite, just because this was probably the most labor of love, I think, and required the most time out of all of them.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it was a fun one. Oh, the sewer map.
I guess we should say, we were talking about the aesthetic of the map a little bit earlier. A lot of that is also to the texture artist that helped me out on this level. We actually started construction of this map before we had any art resources. That was one of the advantages of building a Thief City, is that I kind of felt like the Thief aesthetic was established. But, at the end, when we got a Dink to come in, and I think John P. helped out a little bit too, and made some custom stucco and some custom brick, and we got all that in, I think things really started to come together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So combined with the new Victorian look and kind of the smooth arches and the kind of rich lighting scheme down here, I think is what sold the map aesthetically. Yep. So I'm still kind of happy with it on that front.
Well, again, you feel very familiar because one of the first places we go in the DART project is down in the sewers beneath Bafford's Manor, and so here we are again.
It's a good place to
in the
end up.
sewers. Yeah.